Hi guys, this is Aaron Runt, and today what we're going to do is we're going to go over how to program this part in Catia. So in the last video we had this part that we modeled from a blueprint, so now we're just going to start off where we left off and we're going to go ahead and start programming it. So the first thing I want to do before I leave this part is I want to add a plane. So up here is a plane, and I'm going to click this surface. What we're going to do is we're going to make this a safety plane for our tool. So that way our tool doesn't retract into our part, or when it comes up over the part, it does not go into the part. So when this comes up, you'll notice that it put a plane 1 inch above the surface. Now sometimes it might be down here. We definitely don't want our reference plane back there, our safety plane, because it'll go through the part. So reverse the direction, keep it up top, and we'll hit OK. So with that said, we're going to go ahead and go File, Save. This is our 8M programming part. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and we're going to minimize this, or we can just hit File, New. We have to make the material for the part. We have the model. What we have to make is the material for the part. So we're going to make another part, and we'll call it 8M programming material. Hit Enter, and then what I'll do is we're just going to go ahead and model it real quick. So we'll go to XY, we'll hit Select, hit our square. Now this is going to be helpful. The last part that we did, the origin was in the bottom left. So by keeping my origin in the bottom left, even for my material, will help when I go to assemble the parts together. That'll make sense here in just a little bit. It'll be very seamless and effortless. So let's go ahead and make this 4 inches. And we'll make the width 4 inches. And then we'll come up and we'll turn it into our boss, which was a 1/2 inch. And that's it. So now we got this. We're going to save it. We're going to save it as that right there. That'll be fine. And then we're going to close that out. And we're going to close this one out too. So the first thing we're going to do now is we're going to go to Start, Mechanical Design. We're going to make an assembly. We're going to take those two parts and assemble them together. So the first thing I have to do is I have to select Product 1. So that way it knows where the part's going. And I have two features over here. I have existing component and existing component with positioning. This is for additional parts that we're going to add in. For the initial part, we're going to do that one. So I've got the part that we're going to be making, and as soon as I bring it in, because this is the part that I'm making everything off of, I'm going to select it and I'm going to anchor it in there so it doesn't move. It is constricted to, or constrained to, the CSIS down here in the bottom left. So now I'll select product again, this time with existing positioning, and I'll go to the material. Now notice how that came in right where it's supposed to. Sometimes it'll come in where the part's over here, down here, upside down. You can use this or some of these other features right here for constraining the part correctly. However, because we made our origin the same on both parts, it came in flawlessly, and that's how we want to do it. Alright, so I'll click that. Now I want this material to be translucent, so I'm going to come up to here and I'm going to go to Properties. I'm going to go to Graphics, turn that transparency up, and hit Apply. So notice how my material is transparent but my part is not. This is great. So now all I'm going to do is we're ready to start making our program. We're ready to start adding toolpaths. So I'm going to go File, I'm going to go Start. I'm going to go to Machining. I'm going to go to Prismatic Machining. So from here, I'm going to get my machine set up and let my machine know what the material is, what the part is, and what the safety plane is. So I'm going to click on this and I'm going to double click on it. Okay, this is the machine. So if you'll notice, I have no part design. So I'm going to click here. Now sometimes it's easy to click on the wrong thing. So to prevent this, I'm going to click on my Start. This is the part, this is the material. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to drop down on the part until I see the part body, and I'll simply double click. You can see right there it is selecting the correct part body. So now I'll do the same thing for the stock. I could probably get away with double clicking the stock right here, because you'll notice down here it does show where I'm selecting, but I'm going to do the same thing as if it was hard to click. I hit the part body, I double click, it is there. We do not have any clamps on this part, so there's no need for it. So I will go for plane selection as my safety plane. I will click my safety plane and then hit OK. Everything else is where it needs to be. So that's great. So now my machine is in a good position to where it knows where everything's at. So I'm going to click on Manufacturing Program, and we have these 4 areas that we're going to focus on today. We have drilling, pocketing, facing, and contouring on a profile. Okay? So obviously the first thing we want to do is face the part. So we'll click on Facing, and it's going to want me to pick a certain face. Now it is easy to select the material instead of the part. So what we'll do is we'll come over here and we'll right click, we'll hit cancel so we can select it, and we're going to go hide show. So now I just have my material here. So let's go back up to our facing, and the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to select the top of my part. So I select that because that is where I want to face to. Now it's not going to take off any material because the top of my part and the top of my material are both a 1/2 inch. Now more often than not your material is going to be a lot bigger than your part. That's why it's important that you always select the top to be the top of your part. So that way it does cut the material away. So to make sure that it does cut in our simulation, I'm going to right click on the top. I'm going to offset it a -1/1000th of an inch. That way it's going to help with the simulation. Also I have here is our safety plane. I can click the safety plane. I click on it. We do not have any clamps, so that's going to be just fine. So now it's time to build the tool. So I'll come up here to my tool tab, and I've got tool 1. It shows it to be an end mill. I'm going to change it to a face mill. I'm going to make it 2 inches. Once I change something over here, see it doesn't have anything over here. As soon as I hit enter, that tool is now part of my manufacturing program. So once you have it built, I need to make sure it is 2 inches. So I'll double click right here. I'll make that 2 inches. My tool has a 30/1000 radius. I'll make sure my inserts have a 30/1000 on there. So that all looks really good. So now that my radius and my tool have been designed, I'm going to come up here to my tool path. So my tool path, there's a lot of tabs here, but before we play with anything, I want to preview what the machine thinks it's going to do. So when I hit play, you'll see that it's trying to do a facing project on the inside of my part. Well, that's not right. It's not going to work out at all. So I'm going to hit OK. And then I'm going to come up here to my radial tab because everything else looks pretty good right here, except for inward helical. So I'm going to change this to back and forth or one way. It's just how it does it. If you want to, you can click on them and preview and see what each one looks like. I'm going to go radial. And notice how it says end of path is in. So it's inside this red zone. So I don't want that. I'm going to change that to out. And let's hit the play button so we can see what it looks like. And that is what we're looking for. So that's very good. That's what we want to look for, is that right there. So now when I play it, and it goes pretty fast, that's what it's going to look like. Now you can single block it if you'd like by hitting the drop down menu and point by point replay, but we're not going to do that. So I'm going to simply hit rewind. Now once your toolpath looks good and you want to see it in simulation mode, you can see the video of it, and make sure I always hit the back button. That usually takes you to the top of your program, but we're not running very many tools, so I'm going to hit play. And you'll see that it worked just great. Now remember, we're only taking off 1/1000th of an inch, so that's all we're showing right there. So with that said, I'll hit OK, and then we'll come up here and hit OK as well. So our facing's done. We're going to go ahead and do our pocket. So let's come down to the next one and we'll hit pocketing. And this is going to start pocketing right below here. Now to make sure you are in the right area, I like to come down here to facing, make sure it's selected, and then click pocketing. Just in case, to make sure it gets it in the right order. Okay, if it does flip-flop the orders, there is a way to fix it. It's just kind of, it's a pain in the butt, so we're going to try to make sure we do it right. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to select the bottom of my pocket and click it. Now if you'll notice, it showed these islands here. Now what's going to happen with my toolpath is it's going to try and go around every island and avoid the hole, which is going to actually make little bosses everywhere, and that's just not going to work. It's not going to work at all. So what we're going to do is come to our island function. We're going to right click it, and we're going to remove all islands. So now that they're out of the way, it's going to work out the way it's supposed to. So I'll click the top of my part, and then I'm going to simply hit preview. So when I hit preview, well, it's not going to work because we're still trying to use a 2-inch face mill. So I'm going to hit OK. I'm going to come up here to my tool tab, and the next thing I'm going to make is an end mill. So we'll have our end mill here, and we'll change it to a 1/2 inch. And remember, I'm going to hit enter, so that way it knows to do that tool change. So I'll come down here, and it will show this as the wrong size because we have to build it. So I'm going to make that a 1/2 inch, that a 1/2 inch, and I don't want a radius on it. I want that to be 0. So now I'm going to go ahead and hit play, and I'm going to see what it looks like. Okay, so we can see that there is no radius. If you had a radius there, you'd see it there. And you can also see that it's trying to go straight down in my part. I mean, it's bulldozing right into the part. It's not what we want. We don't want to plunge with our end mill. We want to go down a little bit at a time if we are going to. So I'll hit OK. And I'm going to come up to my strategy. And you'll notice that this looks good. But the thing I want to work on is I want to work on my radial. And I've got tool diameter ratio, and that's how far the step over is. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to change that to max distance. And I don't want it to move very far between paths, so I'll just change it to 1/8 of an inch and hit enter. And you can change it to whatever you want. This is something easy that I work with. Alright, so I'll go to axial, and this is where I change my depth of cut. So if you want it to plunge all at one time and it can do it, you just go right ahead. I'm just going to change my max depth of cut to 50 thousandths, hit enter, and then I'm going to hit play. And I'm going to see if that looks better. Now I think that looks a lot better. You can see the step over between tool paths is 125 thousandths. You can also see that there are multiple levels coming down. There's 50, 50, 50, and then the last one. So now we can hit rewind and play, and we see that it is cutting good. Now this won't show any gouges, it will simply show the tool path. So if I want to check for gouges, I'll turn that on. Remember, it will do the facing tool first, and then it will show my pocketing. Now it is plunging into the material still by 50 thousandths, and if you wanted to change that, there's a lot of macros for approaching for your ramping. This controls your ramping. Now this is a whole nother level of programming that we won't jump into right now, and feeds and speeds as well are over here, but these are two things you can play with later on. Right now I'm just going to go over your tools, specifying the features, and how to make sure the tool path is what you want. So that looked really good. I'm going to hit OK. So the next thing I'm going to be doing is my holes. So I'm going to come up to here and select drilling. Now there is several different features you can click, but we're just going to stick with the simple drilling cycle. First thing I'm going to do is click on the top, and then click on the top of my part. I double clicked. If you don't double click, come down here and hit that OK button, because if you double click it again, it will still be gray. It won't work. Okay, so now I got my locations. So I'm going to click my locations, which I'm just going to click on the circles. What I usually do when I get to the last circles, I double click on it, or you can click on it and hit escape. But I usually double click on it. That way it shows that I do have 8 points on there. Now notice those holes are 196 deep. Now they are from this surface, but the top of my surface is up here. So I want to make sure that it's not going to do these holes and then go to another hole over here and hit the side of my pocket. So to do that, I can either change the total depth here, or I can do it faster by clicking, coming to the bottom of my hole, selecting it, and you see that it does that green, and it does the calculations for me, because that is the distance from the top of the material to the bottom of the 125 thousandths diameter. So that's good. So now what I can do is I can come up to Tool, because it's going to try and do it with that end mill, and I can select Drill, and let's select this to be a 125 thousandths drill. I'll hit Enter, and notice how it did change it over here. Now from here I got to build my drill. So 125 thousandths, and that's it. So let's preview it, and we'll see that looks pretty good. I am above the part. I'll hit play. It does every hole. If I want to, I can go back into simulation mode, hit rewind and play. It does my pocket, and then it will do all of my holes. Very good. So now we're more than halfway done. So let's hit OK. Now here comes a bit of a tricky part. We'll hit OK here because we're done. The next thing I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be doing the profile. Now if I just selected this whole profile, it would try to take some material off here and off here, but I don't want to cut right here because it's already the same size as my material. It's up to you. If you wanted to cut all the way around it, you can, but the way I'm going to show you is how to remove excess material here and then finish the profile here. Alright, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to come up to my profile contouring. So what I want to do is I want to select the top of my part. I'm going to select the bottom, which I'm only cutting that deep. Now notice how it automatically grabbed my contour. So if I hit check it out, you'll see that 1 is trying to do it with my drill, and 2 is trying to do the inside of that profile. So we don't want it to do that. So what I'm going to do is go to Tools first. I want to change to my 1/2 inch end mill, and then make sure that is all correct. Then I'm going to come back to my tool path right here. So I don't want that profile to be the profile it's selecting. So I'm going to right click on it, remove all contours, and I'm going to build a custom contour. So I'm going to click it again, and I'm just going to come up to right here. So see how it did stop. It didn't go any further. I hit OK. Now when I preview it, it is only doing this section right here, but if you'll notice, it didn't clean up anything right here. It's still doing 50 thousandths depth of cuts because it remembers that from when it was pocketing, but I need it to actually come back over some. So I'm going to hit OK, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to come over here to my strategy and my step overs. Okay, zigzag looks fine. If I wanted to, I could change it to one way or helix, but zigzag will be just fine. And then I'm going to come up here to step over. Now step over, where it gets a little confusing and you can't cut a lot of air, so that's why I'm doing this section first. So distance between path is 1/8 of an inch. Here's the thing, it's only doing 1 path. So I'm going to change that to 5, hit enter, and we're just going to simulate it again. Now if you'll notice, it might get everything, however, that's going to be cutting for a long time. I want to be a little bit more efficient with my programming. So I'm going to change this to 3, and then I'm going to increase this because I am using a 1/2 inch tool. Let's increase it to 375, and we play it again, and we can see it's easily taking off that material. So even if we weren't taking that off, we can change this to 250 thousandths, and it should still take it all off. So it's whatever you're most comfortable with, but what we want to do is we want to play what we have in place so you can see how it's working. Now notice it climb cuts 250 and then it conventional cuts 250. So I'm going to change this to one way. If I hit play again, notice how now it is climb cutting only all the way down. We'll turn on our 3D simulation and we'll watch how it plays this way right here. Now my pocket is going to climb cut because that's how it's programmed. So 2 things we'll look at is, 1, I've got a little bit more here, and after I fix that, we'll go on to finishing the rest of the part. So on my step over, we'll just change that to 300 thousandths, hit enter, and we know that will work. So we'll hit OK. So now we got to do the rest of my profile. Okay, so we're going to go right back into profile contour, top of my part, bottom of my part, I'll go ahead and get rid of these contours, or if you wanted to, you could do the contour first and then the top and bottom so it doesn't default. I'm going to left click right here, and then I'm going to go ahead and start clicking my contour all the way to that point. And then I'll hit OK. So now if I go to preview, it's doing a lot of jumping, but that's fine because it is going to be cut in one way. But see how big my step over is? I don't need all those anymore, so I can actually get rid of one. So if you look up here, I'm cutting a lot of air. So I'll hit OK, come back to my strategy. One way is still selected. We'll change that to 0.2 because we're not cutting very much over. And we'll change that to 2. And we'll hit preview. And that looks really good. So with that said, let's watch it and see if it looks good all the way. We have our facing. We have our pocketing. It will do our holes. Change back to our tool to get rid of the roughing. And then it will finish that other side. So that right there is our entire part. Now what's cool about Catia is instead of doing this whole profile, I am able to do sections of a profile at one time rather than the machine trying to do everything at once. So that is a very powerful tool and something that you guys will learn to appreciate later on when you're programming. So I liked how that came out. I will hit OK. And with that, you'll see that you have programmed your part. For posting your program, I'll show that in the next video.